The old tower stood at the edge of the dark wood forest, like a finger pointing toward the heavens. Inside its ancient walls lived Marcus Thorne, a wizard of considerable power and even greater reputation. For 30 years, he had studied the arcane arts. For 30 years, he had mastered spells that could shake mountains and calm storms. But none of that mattered to him as much as his young apprentice, a 14-year-old girl named Lily, who had come to him 3 winters ago with nothing but hope in her eyes and magic in her blood. Lily was special, not because of her power, though that was growing every day. She was special because she reminded Marcus of what it meant to be human. She laughed at his terrible jokes. She burned his breakfast every morning. She asked questions that made him think about things he had long forgotten. In a world that feared wizards, she had given him something precious. She had given him family. The morning started like any other. Marcus was in his study reading ancient texts, while Lily practiced her fire spells in the courtyard below. Her laughter floated up through the open window, mixing with the sound of small flames crackling to life. It was a peaceful sound, a happy sound. Marcus smiled without looking up from his book. Then the screaming began. Marcus moved faster than any man his age should be able to move. He was at the window in a heartbeat, his eyes scanning the courtyard below. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. Goblins, at least 20 of them, their green skin glistening with war paint, their yellow eyes filled with cruel hunger. They had come from the forest like shadows, silent and deadly. And they had Lily. 2 of the larger goblins held her between them, their clawed hands digging into her arms. She was fighting them with everything she had. Fire burst from her fingertips, burning one goblin's face. But there were too many. They bound her hands with enchanted rope that killed her magic. They gagged her so she could not scream. And then they ran, disappearing into the darkness of the forest before Marcus could even reach the courtyard. For a long moment, Marcus simply stood there. The silence was deafening. His hands trembled. His heart pounded against his ribs like a caged animal, and something changed in his eyes. The warmth that Lily had brought to them faded away. What replaced it was something cold, something ancient, something terrible. Marcus Thorne had been a peaceful man for many years. He had put away his war magic and chosen a quiet life. But before that, before the tower and the books and the peaceful days, he had been something else entirely. He had been called the Stormbringer. He had been called the Earthshaker. He had been called the last thing you see. And now, as he stood in his empty courtyard with his apprentice's burnt scarf in his hands, he remembered why. He walked back into his tower, but when he emerged an hour later, he was transformed. Gone were the simple robes of a teacher. In their place was armor that glowed with protective magic. His staff, which had gathered dust for a decade, now pulsed with barely contained power. His eyes glowed with a soft blue light that spoke of barely controlled rage. Marcus Thorne was no longer a peaceful old wizard. He was war-made flesh. The Darkwood Forest had always been home to dangerous creatures, but none were as feared as the Shadowclaw tribe. These goblins were not the stupid, cowardly creatures of children's stories. They were organized. They were clever. They had survived for centuries by being cruel and careful. Their underground kingdom stretched for miles beneath the forest floor, a maze of tunnels and chambers that no outsider had ever mapped. They had taken countless prisoners over the years, using them for labor, for food, for entertainment. They believed themselves untouchable. They were wrong. Marcus entered the forest at sunset. The trees seemed to lean away from him as he passed, sensing the power that radiated from his body. Animals fled in all directions. Even the wind fell silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He walked without hurrying. He had no need to rush. The goblins could not hide from him. Their magic left traces in the air that his trained eyes could follow like footprints in fresh snow. The first goblin scouts found him 2 hours later. There were 5 of them, armed with poisoned arrows and curved blades. They attacked without warning, confident in their numbers and their skill. The battle lasted less than 3 seconds. Marcus did not even break stride. A wave of his hand created a barrier of force that turned their arrows to dust. A word of power sent a bolt of lightning through all 5 goblins at once. Their bodies fell to the forest floor, smoking and still. Marcus stepped over them without looking down. He had no time for mercy. He had no room for hesitation. Lily was waiting. Word spread quickly through the goblin tunnels. Something was coming. Something terrible. The scouts were not returning. The guards at the outer entrances had gone silent. A cold wind was blowing through tunnels that had never known wind. Fear began to spread through the Shadowclaw tribe like a sickness. King Grimtooth, ruler of the Shadowclaw, was not pleased. He sat on his throne of bones, listening to his advisors babble about doom and destruction. The human girl they had captured knelt at his feet, bound and silent but defiant. She was meant to be a gift for their dark god, a sacrifice that would bring the tribe power and prosperity. Now his cowardly subjects wanted to release her. They wanted to beg for peace. Grimtooth spat on the ground in disgust. Then the ceiling exploded. Stone and dirt rained down as Marcus descended into the throne room like an angry god. His staff blazed with white fire. His armor deflected the arrows and spears that flew toward him. His voice, when he spoke, shook the very foundations of the underground kingdom. He spoke only one word. He said her name, Lily. The girl raised her head. Despite everything, despite the fear and the pain and the darkness, she smiled. She knew her master had come. She knew everything would be all right. King Grimtooth was not a coward. He had killed dozens of humans in his long life. He had fought wizards before and won. He drew his enchanted blade and charged at Marcus with a war cry that echoed through the tunnels. His elite guards followed, 300 of the fiercest goblin warriors ever born. What followed could barely be called a battle. It was a massacre, but not the kind the goblins had expected. Marcus raised his staff and spoke words of power that had not been uttered in 100 years. The ground beneath the goblin warriors turned to quicksand, swallowing dozens in seconds. Lightning arced from his fingertips, jumping from goblin to goblin in an endless chain of destruction. Fire erupted from the walls, from the floor, from the very air itself. The goblins screamed and died in numbers that would have seemed impossible. King Grimtooth reached Marcus and swung his enchanted blade with all his strength. The sword shattered against the wizard's armor like glass against stone. Marcus looked down at the Goblin King with eyes that held no pity, no mercy, no humanity at all. He raised one hand and spoke a single word. Grimtooth felt his body freeze. He could not move. He could not breathe. He could only watch as Marcus walked past him toward Lily. The wizard knelt beside his apprentice and gently removed her gag and bonds. His eyes softened for just a moment as he looked at her face. She was bruised. She was frightened. But she was alive. She was alive. Marcus helped Lily to her feet and wrapped his cloak around her shoulders. She was shaking, but she did not cry. She was stronger than she knew. Marcus had always seen that strength in her. Now the goblins had seen it too. He turned to face the surviving goblins. There were perhaps 50 left, cowering in the corners of the throne room. Their king stood frozen among them, still unable to move. Their weapons lay scattered on the ground. Their pride was broken. Their power was gone. Marcus spoke again, and this time his voice was calm. He told them what would happen now. The Shadowclaw tribe would leave these lands forever. They would travel far to the east, beyond the mountains, beyond the deserts, beyond the reach of civilized folk. They would never return. They would never take another prisoner. They would tell every goblin they met about this day. They would tell them about the wizard who came for his apprentice. They would tell them about the price of touching what belonged to Marcus Thorne. Then he released King Grimtooth from his paralysis. The Goblin King fell to his knees, gasping for air. For a long moment, he simply stared at the wizard with eyes full of hatred and fear. Then, slowly, he nodded. He had no choice. His warriors were dead. His kingdom was in ruins. His pride meant nothing if there was no one left to witness it. The goblins began their exodus that very night. They gathered what they could carry and fled into the darkness, heading east as they had been commanded. Within a week, the Shadowclaw tribe was nothing but a memory. Within a month, stories of their fate had spread to every goblin clan in the known world. The message was clear. Humans were not prey. Humans were not victims. And wizards? Wizards were something else entirely. Marcus and Lily returned to their tower as the sun rose over the forest. The old wizard was exhausted. His magic was drained. His body ached in ways it had not ached in years. But as he watched Lily run ahead of him toward home, already complaining about being hungry, he smiled. The warmth returned to his eyes. The Stormbringer faded away, replaced once again by a simple teacher with a terrible sense of humor. That evening, Lily burned dinner as usual. Marcus complained as usual. They laughed together as usual. And somewhere far to the east, the remnants of the Shadowclaw tribe huddled around their campfires and whispered about the human wizard who had taught them the true meaning of fear. The world would remember this day. The goblins would remember this day. And somewhere in the Darkwood Forest, other creatures who had thought humans were weak heard the stories and learned an important lesson. Love was not weakness. Love was the most dangerous force in all the world. Because when you threatened what a human loved, there was no limit to what they would do. There was no depth they would not reach. There was no fury that could match theirs. Marcus Thorne had proven that truth with fire and lightning and blood. And as he watched his apprentice practice her spells in the courtyard, the next morning, he knew he would prove it again if he ever had to. Because that was what it meant to be human. That was what it meant to love. And that was why, in a universe full of monsters and magic and darkness, humanity would never truly fall.